Hello. Let me start with a disclaimer. I have no right to say these things. I have no authority, no education, I have nothing. I just have ideas, and so I'd like to share them, okay? Now, in the 4 previous videos in this series, I talked about the word that. I talked about how I thought that might be an extremely significant word. I talked about how it might be one of the very first words used by humans, and I went on, okay? And I also talked about the 5 grammatical functions of the word that in the contemporary or traditional sense, okay? I talked about how it's referred to as a determiner, an adverb, demonstrative pronoun, and then the 4th thing, which we're going to talk about today, is the so-called relative pronoun or relativizer, okay? Now this is the very difficult part. This is very difficult to explain. People who know grammar understand the relative pronoun or the relativizer, but it's a peculiar function, and also I'm going to go deeply into it, look deeply into it, and explain why I don't think of it as a relative pronoun or a pronoun at all. But first we have to look at the basics. We have to go deep in, break it down into little pieces, and take a look at it, okay? So then there's the 5th function, which we'll get into in the future. But right now, I'd like to take a look at that 4th function. Now, one thing to keep in mind in my videos is the fact that I prefer the perspective or the outlook or the worldview of prescriptive grammar. In other words, grammar has evolved, and some would say maybe it peaked. Some say maybe it didn't peak yet, but it's either going to peak or it's going to plateau. In other words, grammar is going to be perfected or nearly perfected and come up. At some point it's going to level off, and I think we're at a kind of a level off period. And while we're at that level off period, that plateau, people have introduced this new concept called descriptive grammar. Descriptive is, in a nutshell, it's like, okay, well, people talk like this, people use these words and this diction, this syntax, so we're going to say that grammar is correct because they use it. It's justified as being correct because people use it that way. Well, I don't buy that. I mean, I do to a certain degree, but for prescriptive, like I say, you're always going to grow in a sense. And with descriptive, at some point, you're going to devolve and language will deteriorate. If you listen to people speak or write in contemporary times, a lot of times you'll notice that with the descriptive mindset, you'll see sloppy punctuation, you'll see strange use of terms, and it just goes on and on. I'm not going to get into a battle between prescriptive and descriptive, but I prefer the prescriptive approach because it's solid, and when you speak or write, you're going to sound literate, you're going to sound intelligent, even if you aren't, like I do. But the point is, I say this because I wanted to tell the viewers that for the so-called relative pronouns, all right, the word that I use for non-human things, to refer to non-human things, and the word who for human things. And that's in a prescriptive manner, okay? Now that's in a prescriptive manner. Descriptive writers, they might use the word that to refer to humans, and I think it's crappy. I think when you listen carefully, it kind of makes you sound illiterate. So I wanted to make that clear. I'm going to be using that to refer ordinarily to nouns that are non-human. Okay, I hope I'm saying this right. This is an extremely difficult topic for me. This is even harder than my music topics. This is very difficult. Okay, so bear with me. Now, so far, I've shown the word that in its base form. Okay, in its base form, it has a one-to-one relationship with another word, or you could say it has a single function. In the base form, it has in each instance, it has a single grammatical function, okay? So like for number one, I refer to the function number one as definite article. And it has a one-to-one relationship with a noun, you see that? And then for number two, the second function, I refer to it as a pro-form adverb, or you could call it just a pro-adverb. Either way, it's okay. And then it has a one-to-one relationship. In this example, let's say the word that to this adjective here, okay? And then the third grammatical function, I call it a demonstrative pronoun, and that's also traditional. And so you see the relationship of the word that, the demonstrative pronoun, with the word book, the noun. You see there? And then now we're going to talk about number 4 today, and then even in number 5, when we get into noun clauses, okay? The word that will have it'll be a single function use, single function, and it'll still be a one-to-one relationship with the word that and the noun clause. And we'll talk about that later on, okay? Now, got to keep moving because this is very difficult. Now, the relative pronoun and relativizer, that's what they call it, relativizer. That's a crappy word. Anyway, so let's look at examples of how the so-called relative pronoun is used in contemporary times, okay? Let's use this sample sentence. The book that is green is a classic, okay? The book that is green is a classic. Let's say it's the book Ethics by Aristotle, or Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, whatever. It's a classic, you know. So you have that sample sentence, right? And you have here the book, that's your head noun, and your relative pronoun, that's what they call it. Then you have your relative clause, all right? That is green. That is green is your supposed relative clause. So when you break it down then, you see that you have an underlying statement or underlying information that's trying to be imparted to you. And basically that information is book is green, okay? The book that is green. So if you break it down, you see book, all right? Your subject, verb is, and green is your subject complement. So you see in this case that in this first example, that the noun, all right, the noun will be the subject, okay, and your underlying main thought. Understand that? Take a look at that. Now in the second application, all right, we have an example sentence. The plant that he bought was a rose. This is hard for me to read, it's backwards. The plant that he bought was a rose. Now, if you get the gist, you look at the main idea here. The main idea is the underlying message is he bought plant. He bought a plant. You see, your head noun, your relative pronoun, and your relative clause, all right, are telling you that he bought the plant. So in this case, he, all right, he would be the subject of that main thought, that profound thought. Bought would be the verb, and the plant here, all right, would be the object. So you see your head noun is an object. So I just showed you that the head noun can be a subject or an object, all right? I'm showing you that clearly. You can take a peek at that. But that is your basic relative pronoun being used in a relative clause. And that's contemporary or traditional mindset. And there is another one, which I don't care for. I don't study it much because I don't encounter it frequently. And that's a case where the noun, the head noun in this case, all right, that would be the head of this particular cluster of terms, would be used as an object of a preposition. So our sentence is, We saw the cabin that Lincoln once lived in. I just made that up. I don't know if he lived in a cabin. I just made it up. We saw the cabin that Lincoln once lived in, all right? Now, in this, the main sentence, all right, the main clause, we saw the cabin, all right? We, subject, saw, verb, cabin would be your object of this main clause, okay? But we have here now, we have cabin, the noun. We have the relative pronoun. You see that? Then you have your relative clause. All right, that's that line there. And so the main idea here, the gist, the thing that the relative clause is trying to tell you, okay, is that Lincoln lived in the cabin. All right? Lincoln now would be the subject, right? Lived would be the verb, right? In is your preposition, in, but your object of the preposition is way back over here, functioning as a head noun. So you see Lincoln lived in cabin. So the third function of this noun, it would be object of preposition, the object of the preposition. All right? So you see the head noun could be a subject, and an object, all right, a direct object you might call it, or the object of a preposition. All right, now that's how relative pronouns are ordinarily used. But what do we really have? This is when I started thinking about this long time ago. I thought about it on my own about 30 years ago, and then when we were homeschooling our children, I thought about it again, and I kept looking at that word. When we homeschooled, I told the children, I said, if you don't understand something, just keep looking at it. Just keep looking at it. You don't even have to think. Just look at it. And you get tired of doing it, just go take a nap or go take a break, but come back and just keep looking at it. And this is how I got it. I just kept looking at it. So here's, what do we really have? All right, do we really have a relative pronoun? Let's say another sentence. Let's use another sentence from previous. The book that is green is a classic, all right? Now, is that actually a relative pronoun? Now, pronoun we know is a word that it substitutes a noun or a noun phrase, okay? It substitutes, it sits in for a noun or noun phrase, all right? So here we have the book that is green, all right? Book that. Now we can know from authority. Somebody told us it's a relative pronoun. Somebody taught you that's a relative pronoun. Doggone it. Don't you think otherwise? Or we can know from intuition. All right. We can say, hey, I know what that is. Or we can know from rationalization. We can work it out, think it through, use logic and reasoning, and we can get it. All right. So we know then, and from our mind tells us that refers back in some way to the word book. Okay. It refers back, it does. It's relative to the word book. We'll give it that. But it's not complete. You see, book that. It's not, not complete without your verb phrase here. It's just not complete. That means nothing. It can't stand on its own. All right? Now we look at it from a slightly different perspective. We put the word book in where the word that is, okay? And then we get the book is green. You see, you put the word book in here because this is supposed to be a pronoun sitting in for this word here. So you have the book is green. Well, there's a problem there. The problem there is you don't have that one-to-one relationship that we mentioned earlier, right? And you don't have a base form function anymore. You don't have it. So let's look at a third way of perceiving what we really have in the traditional or contemporary sense, okay? We have book that is green. So we notice something right away. It's position restricted. It's restricted. Book that is green. The word that has to come in the middle. It has to come in the middle or it won't work. So we could call that a meso function. Meso meaning middle. So we know it has to come in the middle. And you say, well, Joey, I understand that you want to rename the word that per function, per each individual function. But what does it matter where the word that sits? Well, let's look at regular pronouns, all right? They're called personal pronouns. Let's look at personal. Mary is pretty. She is also very intelligent. We really like her. Okay? Mary is pretty. She is also very intelligent. We really like her. That's just a regular personal pronoun. You look at Mary and you look at she, you know exactly what she means, refers to. You know, you see her, you know exactly. What you have here is you have stability and precision. These pronouns, these personal pronouns, are stable and precise. In other words, they're basic, common, and familiar pronouns, all right? And then when they're used by a literate, skilled writer, they will not cause confusion for the reader, okay? That makes it clear. When you see she, you know what she means. When you see her, you know what it means, okay? Boom, it's done. And also, they're multi-positional. Multi-positional. You can put them almost anywhere, and they work. So, you see that this regular pronoun is clear, it's easy, all right? But the relative pronoun is kind of goofy and kind of weird. So, you ask then, again, is that really a relative pronoun? All right? The book that is green is a classic. Is this really a relative pronoun? Well, I say no. No, not entirely. It's hard to do this in one or two videos, but you have to think through. You have to keep looking at it and think deeply, and you'll finally get it. It took me years. Now, you read the sentence that I just read. You read it. Excuse me. You're reading. You make assumptions in the mind. Then you have cognition. In other words, the words with cognition, the words are perceived together. They're perceived together, and they're understood. At least enough to get by. They're understood. So you say, okay, well, the word that, it's a pronoun type word, all right? It's a pronoun type word. It's followed, in this case, by a verb phrase, all right? Sometimes it's followed by an entire clause, all right? But it's referring to, it's relative to the book, all right? We'll give it that. We'll say, contemporary-wise, we'll give it that. We'll say, hey, you know what? That really could be a relative pronoun, and that really could be a good name for that term. But post-cognition, once you're done processing that relative pronoun and that relative clause, once you're done processing it in your brain, almost instantly, the word that loses all its phrase or clause-specific significance. Because why? You saw this, you looked at it, you saw the book that is green, but the mind almost immediately switches over and thinks of it as the green book. The mind almost, when you read, it's lightning fast. I think it's faster than the speed of thought. Probably the speed of knowledge, the speed of knowing is probably a little bit faster than the speed of reading. But the point is, look, your mind goes from the book that is green. See, the mind sees the green book. You see? It sees the green book. The so-called relative pronoun is now relegated. It's poof, it's gone. So give me a second, I have to reach over. Hold on. So now, I'm trying to go fast here. The question is now, we looked at sample sentences here, okay? We looked at these sample sentences. And we don't, at this point, if you're with me, we kind of don't think that the word that is a relative pronoun. But the question is the clause itself, is it a relative clause? The book, that is green, okay? That is green, is that really a relative clause? Sometimes they call it an adjective clause. You'll see grammar books, or you go on the internet, you'll see the term or phrase adjective clause. Or sometimes they call it a defining clause. Sometimes there's the non-defining clause. But in our next video, we're going to discuss, is it really a relative clause? And then once we determine, is it really a relative pronoun and a relative clause, do we keep the name or do we go on to my new term, which we will. Okay, that's it. Hey, thanks for being patient. I hope this sounded right, and I hope it made sense. It's extremely difficult, the most difficult topic I think I've ever done. So thanks for being patient, and hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.